Good morning, everyone. Good evening, and good afternoon to viewers from all walks of life. This is Denzimus, and you are welcome to the channel of truth, enlightenment, freedom, and the channel of breaking empaths free. If you are new on this channel, I talk about narcissism and narcissistic abuse. I talk about spirituality, and I talk about personal and self-development. And if any of that resonates with you, I invite you guys to join us. Give us a like, share the video with friends, and you may subscribe if you haven't already. And for those that have always been with us, you are welcome back. And I thank you for your love and support. Now, there's been a question that has been asked by a subscriber, and I want you guys to have a look. Alright, so first of all, I'm not really surprised because I've been having this question, I think, ever since I started doing videos. For a very long period now, I've been having this kind of questions. How do you know what you know? Where do you get your information? What kind of books are you reading? How do you have all this information? So a lot of guys are really surprised as to how exactly I get all this info as regarding narcissistic abuse and, of course, other issues regarding spirituality. Now, I've had a very long time, a very long experience with narcissists. So the very first reason why you believe, or why I know what I know, is because I've had a very, very continued experience with narcissists. So I've met a lot of these individuals, so many of them along my journey. And you see, the only difference was that in the early days, especially when I was growing up, especially the times when I was a child, up to the time when I was an adult, there were so many of these guys I used to see along my journey. But of course, in those days, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know anything about narcissism. You know what I mean? So, because I'm an empath, you know what I mean? So, being an empath, you've got the ability to absorb other people's emotions. You know what I mean? So you can actually feel what other people are feeling. So most of the times, when I was involved with the narcissists, it was more of I would usually empathize with them. You know what I mean? Because usually I've been dealing with this kind of individuals. I did not know who they were in the first place. But when I got involved with them, I noticed that actually for some reason I always used to empathize with them. And also because of that, I was able to most of the times step into their shoes, because you see, the empaths, most of the times, the reasons why actually we last very long periods of time with narcissists, that's because we are trying to empathize with those individuals. We're believing that there is something we can do, there is a way we can help them, there is something we can do to fix them, because you will notice that actually they have got these patterns that are usually not ordinary, not the regular patterns that you know. And sometimes as an empath, we always try to step in, we try to help them, we try to, do one or two things with them. And most of the times, even without knowing it subconsciously, a lot of empaths, what they have done, they have even sometimes stepped in their shoes. You know what I mean? They've tried to fit in their shoes, because normally the empath, they try to stand behind the narcissist. You know what I mean? Because when you're involved with the toxic individual and they're dragging you along the mess, they're dragging you along with their mess. Most of the times, what you're trying to do, because you're failing to understand them, they're saying things you don't understand, they're doing things you don't understand. So most of the times, what the empaths do, I don't know for other empaths, but I think for the super empaths, what they do, they stand behind those individuals and they try to see the world from their perspective. You know what I mean? So it's like sometimes as you empathize with somebody and you're trying to find a solution to help them or to fix them, or even sometimes to help them in one way or the other. So what you do now is you stand behind them. Sometimes you may even subconsciously fit in their shoes, so that you try to understand the world, because there's a possibility you think that it is possible there's a world that there's a world that they see that you don't understand. You know what I mean? So because you're trying to understand these individuals, the way they reason, their personality and everything, all these things, all these irregular patterns about them, you're trying to understand them. So you fit in their shoes and you're now trying to see the world in their own eyes. What are they exactly seeing? Because there's a possibility sometimes you're thinking that you may sometimes have it wrong. You may have thought sometime that you don't have it right. You know what I mean? And maybe sometimes you've even sometimes thought about yourself as probably you couldn't understand their world. You know what I mean? So because of that, you went into their world. You know what I mean? You fit in their shoes and you went into their world. So you went into their heads and you just try to understand the world exactly. How are they seeing things? You know what I mean? For them to do those things they do and behave the way they behave, how are they seeing? What does their world look like? The world look like? Because the world the empath knows is not the same world that these toxic individuals know. These toxic individuals know. So what happens is that the empath now you try to stand behind the narcissists and you let them take the lead, because we all know at a certain degree that narcissists, normally they want to take the lead. They know that they're broken individuals and they know that actually those buses, whatever ride they're taking you, it isn't going anywhere. So most of the times, the empaths, what we do, we sit in that bus and we see, let them take the lead and we want to see where we are going. You know what I mean? So I've happened to do these things over and over again subconsciously. Of course, at a certain degree, I awakened later on and I noticed that actually I was not a part of this mess. So I got myself out of the mess and I stopped participating in their mess. But the thing is, I escaped out of that mess with the knowledge. You know what I mean? So most of this knowledge we acquire. A lot of coaches around the world, you see them talking things, describing things that you can't even understand. You don't even understand how do they know. I've had that question a lot of times on my videos, and actually sometimes it's even baffled me. But again, I don't blame the guys who are out there, because when you wake up, you'll understand that actually you wake up now, you've already seen the mess. You've been in that mess, you've seen it, you've participated in the mess even sometimes, because a lot of you guys, of course, if you've been involved with narcissists, you've noticed at some point that the narcissists have been dragging along with you to do their mess. They've been dragging you in their mess, and you've been part of their behaviors of the things they have been doing. You know what I mean? You've been part and parcel of their own mess. So you have already seen it. Subconsciously, you have already seen it. You have experienced it. You have seen it. Not only have you experienced it, but you have also actually seen it. Because why? You have been able to stand in those guys' shoes, stand behind them, and let them take the lead. Now you've been able to see the world of the narcissist, how they view the world and how they see the world. But of course, a lot of times I've done that and it hasn't ended well. You know what I mean? So I remember, I've told you guys that I've been married to a narcissist for 7 years. I've been engaged with a narcissist for 7 years. So I've seen a lot of things. Most of the times I thought that maybe I had to lay back and just watch things from a distance, let the narcissist take the lead and see where this thing is going to go. But of course, eventually, each and every single move, each and every single step those individuals were making, I was watching everything. And remember, the empath, they always take notes. So you're watching each and every single detail, you are taking notes. You're registering each and everything they're doing. And of course, even sometimes you see the things are not adding up, the patterns are not adding up, these things are not making sense. Most of the times, the empaths, we have usually tried to keep silent. Because why? We're trying to keep the peace. We don't want to cause a lot of commotion. So at the end of the day, there's going to be chaos, because you already know how narcissists operate. The very moment you come out and confront them about their behaviors, usually they either gaslight you, they'll blame shift, they will shift the blame to you, or sometimes they will do something what they call the projection. So they'll project a lot of their insecurities to you. So most of the times what we do, because we try to avoid the confrontations and we try to avoid the conflicts in those vicinities. So what we do now, we just let everything as it is. You know what I mean? So we don't mention nothing. But remember that not mentioning something doesn't mean that you're stupid, or doesn't mean that you green or things like that. You are seeing everything for what it is. But it's just because you don't want to come out and speak, because you're involved with somebody who doesn't accept any BS that they have done. So the ability of stepping in somebody's shoes is one of the reasons why I came up with understanding the narcissist on a very, very deep level eventually. And I think the other thing I can talk about, the reason why I know what I know, is because I got my awakening, of course, eventually. I've told you guys that I awakened in 2019. And that is the time when I was able to see the narcissists for who they are. You know what I mean? I had already seen these guys every now and then swinging in and out of my life. I didn't know who they were. You know what I mean? I couldn't understand who they were. I couldn't understand what they were all about. And again, whether it was family members, friends, sometimes even relationships. So I've engaged in a lot of narcissists. Even in my videos, you guys have heard me talking about the greater narcissist. So I've been able to encounter a wide range of narcissists, from the lesser ones to the mid-range, to the greater ones, to the ultra ones. So I've met a lot of narcissists along my journey. But the thing is, when I awakened, I was able to finally understand, because now the whole thing has been lifted. Remember that I've been studying all these things, these patterns along my journey. You know, when I've been with them, participating with them, sometimes engaging with them, you know what I mean? So I've been monitoring these patterns. I was taking notes. I was seeing everything for what it is, and I could know which was the normal patterns and which wasn't. So the awakening now brought me behind the veil. You know what I mean? When I awakened, I finally knew that okay, now it wasn't all about me that was crazy. I wasn't crazy in the first place. You know what I mean? Because you see, when I awakened, the first thing that came to my mind that maybe sometimes I could have blamed myself for, you know, overreacting, or sometimes, you know, overthinking things or things like that. But when I awakened, actually that awakening brought me to the realization that everything that I'd always seen along my journey, everything was actually, it was what it was. So my eyes were not lying to me, my brain was not playing tricks on me. It was what it was, you know what I mean? So I could now eventually see these vampires for who they are, exactly for who they are, not even without a mask. You see, the problem is a lot of people don't understand that when you wake up, you strip a mask, you strip the narcissist naked. It's like the narcissist is coming in front of you naked. It's like they're wearing no clothes. When you wake up, guys, you're not going to believe it. The very moment the veil lifts and you can see those individuals behind the mask, behind the veil, that image behind the veil, you know what I mean? I don't want to go into the details of what I saw behind the veil, behind the mask, but I've shared more of my videos. I've told you guys what I saw behind the mask. When you awaken, you're going to see exactly the vampires you've been dealing with, those beasts that you've been dealing with, and that is the moment exactly when you're going to start fighting back. So a lot of you empaths have heard people talking about the empaths have gone supernova. When the empath starts fighting back because they believe enough is enough, you know, like for me, for example, I was counting all these years and I was thinking that is it, you know what I mean? There isn't going to be any more mess. I know who I am. I'm not a bad person. You know what I mean? So I want to come out and fight. I'm going to stand for what is right, and I'm going to stand for my rights. And I started fighting back. So that is exactly when you see the empath, they go supernova. And most of the times when the empath goes supernova, so the narcissists, what they do, they start running away. You know what I mean? They start disappearing and running away, because for the first time, they're seeing you speak or sometimes fight for yourself for the very first time in your life. Most of the times when you awaken, that's the moment you start taking back your power, fighting and everything. You start defending yourself, and on top of that, you also create extremely very strong boundaries for yourself, because you don't want any form of manipulator. It doesn't matter who they are. Guys, let me tell you something. It does not matter what person it is. It doesn't matter if it's your brother, your sister, your father. When you wake up and you know what is behind the mask, and you've understood what is narcissism, you know who is a narcissist. Finally, you know who these people are for the real truth. You know who they are. That is exactly when you're going to notice that actually you're never going to take anything for granted, and that is the moment you see a lot of empaths what they have usually done. Like for me, in my case, I was a black sheep of the family as well. So that's the moment when you see you take back your power and you eliminate a lot of people out of your life, because now you can see everybody in front of you naked. They're no longer playing games. They're no longer saying funny things to you, because you understand everything. You've already been in that game. You've swum along with them, so you understand everything. You can read the patterns. You can fit the puzzles. You can add up all the dots, and everything is fitting. So at that point in time, there is nobody in whichever category can ever come to you and manipulate you and tell you something that you do not understand. You understand everything finally. When it comes to toxicity, narcissistic abuse, and everything, you understand everything finally. So I can credit my knowledge and wisdom to finally, I could say, the experience I've gone through, you know what I mean, having been with those individuals along my journey, you know, along my life, having been with them, having swum with them, having played with them and everything, and seeing the world in their eyes. You know what I mean? That was the most important thing for me, to stand behind and see the world in front of their eyes, so that I can see how their life is all about, what their life is all about, and what do they see that other people do not see. You know what I mean? And the second thing I can talk about is the credit. I give myself the credit to my awakening. Of course, when I woke up and I really understood that actually, so this was narcissistic abuse. For a very long period of time, I think in a couple of years, it could have been like 5-6 years, I started wondering that why is it possible that there are some people who are like this and some people are like that. So I was starting to see the differences in people. You know what I mean? I knew that they were nice people, you know what I mean, empathetic people, nice, genuine people, but I also noticed there were also people who were extremely toxic and very, very dangerous, you know what I mean? So that's the moment I knew the difference between good and bad people, you know what I mean? So awakening put me behind the veil, and I understood everything for what it was, and that is exactly why you find me bringing you information you have never seen anywhere else. You will never hear this information in schools. When you're talking about narcissism, and especially on the spiritual perspective, you will never hear your professors and teachers teachers and graduates, and you will never hear this information in schools. You will never hear it from your pastors. You will never hear it from your parents. You're going to hear it from first-hand victims and survivors of narcissistic abuse. Those guys, they're going to come around and they're going to tell you. And again, it's not only me. You will see a lot of guys online, of course. They've got their own perspective when it comes to narcissistic abuse. They come around and share their stories. They'll tell you a lot of things. But for a person who has walked around with the narcissist, that person is going to tell you first-hand information. That is the information you'll never find anywhere else. Because for you to understand narcissistic abuse, you have got to go through narcissistic abuse. There is nobody who will sit down with you. I've mentioned it in my videos every now and again. There is nobody who will ever sit with you and they're going to tell you who is a narcissist when they have not been with him. You cannot study narcissist in books. Yes, they will tell you a little bit of things. They do this and then they do that. Then they do that and they do this. They tell you some of the things that they do. But when you have not experienced narcissistic abuse, you can never be able to feel exactly what it is to be abused by a narcissist. You know what I mean? And you never know those individuals exactly for who they are. So for the subscriber who brought in that question, those are the answers I have for you. Number one is the experience, and number two, it was my awakening. Because when I awakened, and of course I started to ascend on a very much more spiritual level, I got more and more enlightened, and I got more and more deep into behind the veil. You know what I mean? Because usually when you ascend, when you're ascending, it's like the process of ascension. It also takes you down the rabbit hole. So you start digging down the rabbit hole and getting to the bottom of facts, to the bottom and the facts of things. So that's where you're going to find a lot of information that is not talked about in the churches, in the families, in schools, in social media, and everything like that. There's a lot of narcissism on social media. You know what I mean? Actually, at some point, I'm going to do a video about digital narcissism. So because there's a lot of these digital narcissists around the world. You know what I mean? The social media sometimes is even breeding narcissists. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of narcissists around the world. You know what I mean? But very few people actually understand what they are. Even sometimes society and social media is even promoting most of them. You know what I mean? So there are a lot of them. They are everywhere. It can be your neighbor next door. It can be your family member. It can be your friend. It can be the woman or the man you're sleeping with in bed. So those individuals, they're everywhere. For us who have been there, we've seen it all. We understand it. We have gotten more enlightened. Because when I told you guys, when I was going down the rabbit hole, I was getting more enlightened and more enlightened. And of course, the more you get enlightened, is more you get. Is more what do they call it? Is more you get highly intuitive. I'm an intuitive empath, number one, and I'm also a psychic empath. So you get more intuitive and you get more psychic, and a lot of these things you don't have to sit down with somebody to explain to you. You already know. There is things you already know. You just know. You just, and when asked, there's a video I did and somebody asked me that, how do you know these things? And I told them, we know things, and most of the time you're going to come around and ask us, how do you know this? And the thing we're going to tell you is we do not know how we know, but we know. You know what I mean? And a person who is enlightened, they know things and they don't know how they know it, how they know, but they just know this. You know what I mean? So that's part of the enlightenment. For the most of you guys who are waking up, you're going to find yourself in positions whereby you know things, you don't know how you know, but you know somehow you know. And of course, to put together the experience you've also, like you guys have been through narcissistic abuse, the experience is also going to add to the whole thing, whereby you're going to put experience and the awakening together, because awakening also brings you to the enlightenment. So when you bring all those two things together, you now bring a full picture of the whole image of narcissistic abuse. So, well, of course, there are some other people who are talking about narcissism in a scientific perspective, in a psychological perspective, but for me, I don't really follow a lot of those guys. Well, they do what they do, but me personally, who was finally experienced that thing on a very deep level, narcissistic abuse on a very deep level, I know what it is. I don't need anybody to come around and explain to me who is a narcissist. The very moment I see them come around or think, I'll just know who they are, even before they start talking. Sometimes they may get away, 1 or 2 words, 1 or 2 seconds, but before they know it, I'll catch up on them. Because I've already experienced those guys, and I know each and every single pattern and each and every single thing and the way they behave. So let me know what you think about this video in the comment section below, guys. For the subscriber who sent in that question, I appreciate you, and I hope you have got the answer that you're looking for. Drop us a comment in the section below. Donate and support to this cause, and guys, book a course. Book a session with me. I will talk with you. We shall go into the details of what you're dealing with. Much love and blessings, guys. There's about signing out, and peace. Catch you in my next one.